you were in Sofia, in Paris, in New Jersey, and now you're in Australia. So basically that's where I have to move next, because I've been doing exactly the same thing. So anyway, he's a professor at, what is it called? Okay, the School of Computing and Communication at the University of Technology in Sydney. And he also had a PhD in mathematics, right? So he does a lot of theoretical work, measurements. And today he's going to talk about network timing. So we move from alarms to timing, and a very cool thing happening with the leap second and NTP.
Thank you. So, as we all know in measurement, timestamps are extremely important. Right? There's been a lot of papers that we've heard about the last 2 days where round-trip times and latencies have been absolutely central. And those timestamps would almost certainly have been obtained through system clocks in standard operating systems. And those system clocks would be synchronized to time servers over the internet. So I'm interested in working out whether those time servers are doing what they should be doing. Are they doing crazy stuff? How would we even know if they were? But today, it's something more specific, a kind of a fun niche topic, leap seconds. Got lucky enough to capture some data during a leap second. So first we need to talk about time. The Temps Atomique International is the primary standard. This is everything you would expect from a simple linear Newtonian time. Every second has the same duration. It's a continuous time scale. But we also need to track the Earth's rotation, and that's where the universal time comes in. Here the seconds are not equal. They're continuously adjusted to match the slowing down of the Earth's rotation. But that's not very convenient. So the time scale that we're used to using, which you've probably all heard of, UTC, tries to do the best of both worlds. Seconds are on the whole of identical duration, but every now and again you have jumps, and those jumps are designed to make sure that it never gets too far from the UT1. So UTC is the time scale that we're talking about. So this is what UTC looks like after a leap second. As a function of TAI, that lovely linear time scale, we have this simple jump at this leap second here. And in this case, this is a so-called positive leap second because it's jumping down. Now this generates a lot of problems. See this red part, this whole, although it's a simple jump at a single point, the whole second before creates many issues for implementations because we have non-uniqueness here. And that's the cause of many systems that break during leap seconds. And it's not hard to find evidence of things going badly wrong during leap seconds, even though they've been around for a long time and software has tried to improve, still bad things happen. But I haven't got time to go into all the fun stuff, bad stuff that happens. I want to focus on the analysis that we're going to do. And specifically, let me get rid of that stupid little bar down there. Yes. Specifically, we're talking about this leap second that occurred at the end of June last year, at that precise time down there. Actually, I tried to catch the one prior to that was in 2012, and I got some data for that one, but then it got lost, which was very upsetting. But it's okay, because 3 years later, I was able to do it again, bigger and better. Now I need to quickly give the basics of these time servers that are out there in the network. The network time protocol is the protocol used to transport timestamps between clients and servers, and it distributes UTC. The system is rooted by stratum 0 reference time sources like GPS or atomic clock, but they're not networking devices. The root of the actual networking hierarchy of the stratum 1 servers, they're directly connected to those stratum 1 0 sources, and they form the root of the actual distribution across the network to other servers. The servers with the stratum 2 server talks directly to stratum 1, stratum 3 talks directly to stratum 2, etc., etc. So what about NTP and leap seconds? Well, how does the stratum 1 learn about leap seconds? Well, it can do that from its stratum 0 source. For example, GPS fully supports leap second information, and alternatively from this leap seconds file. Now, if you're not a stratum 1, you could also use that file, but the main mechanism, which is integrated into the NTP protocol, is that your server is supposed to be telling you when a leap second is going to happen. For a certain period of time during the month in which the leap second will occur, because leap seconds always occur in the last second of the month. Certain bits are supposed to be set in every single packet that's sent to the client of that server. And I'll give more information about that later. So our test bed, we have a test bed in Australia, and from there we're going to test a bunch of servers worldwide, and we do that by initiating standard NTP client-server timing request response packet transfer. We do packet time stamping with a DAG card, roof-mounted high-quality GPS, 200 nanoseconds precision. That's more than enough for our purposes. And our DAG was configured so that it wouldn't jump when the leap second happened. So it's, for all intents and purposes, it's a nice TAI, effectively, for us. How do we choose what servers to look at? Well, we only looked at 176. It's already quite a lot because there's a lot of manual work involved in the way we did this. The majority of those were based on a list of Stratum ones maintained at ntp.org. We picked ones which were listed as open access, which we knew had been responsive during a period of time at which we've been keeping an eye on this, and which during the time of the experiment they resolved and they responded. And to that we added a few extra ones that were of interest to us and more generally, the 5 NTP servers used by Cater's Art Network and a bunch of Australian servers, including some private ones and the ones in our lab. The experiment began just a day or so before the leap second and continued for 22 days. In this experiment, we just had a single host with multiple instances of an NTP client, which we developed over the years known as Heraklion, which is generating that flow of NTP packets to the server and back. For our purposes here, Heraklion performs a few services, but the timestamps themselves come from the DAG. We're not using the Heraklion clients really in this experiment. This is very important. Polling period is 64 seconds for each of these servers. So the data that we get out of this is, for each server, we have these 4 tuples of timestamps. On the DAG side, first of all, the packet leaves, it gets timestamped by the DAG, arrives at the server timestamps it, leaves the server timestamps it again, comes back, DAG timestamps it again. So what are we looking for? We want to assess the server quality. How does it behave in the face of leap seconds? And there are 2 aspects to this. The clock compliance. Does the clock do the simple, that's clean, sharp jump that it should or not? And protocol compliance. Does it set those bits to warn its clients like it should? Of course, the hard one is the clock compliance. We want to really assess how the deviations occur because guess what? We see quite a variety of complicated behavior, not just a simple jump in many cases. And I'll define in a second a metric called time to expected behavior, which basically means how long do we have to wait until the stupid server is doing what it should be doing. See, I'm preparing for bad behavior here. So this is the raw data, and from that we can get the forward delay to the server, the backward delay coming back, round trip time, this thing which I call server change. If you think about it, what this is measuring is the difference between what the server is doing with respect to the DAG. So we should see that jump in this change time series. On the other hand, if we factor that jump out, this is an indicator function, it's just going to remove that jump. Then we end up comparing directly against UTC, against what it should be doing, and so we call that server error. So now I can define my time to expected behavior as the first time after the jump when that error is 0 up to whatever noises are floating around. And unfortunately, because of that poll period of 64 seconds, I can't be right at the jump or just right after the leap like I'd like to be. I'm going to be in some interval, potentially 64, in the worst case, 64 seconds away from, which is a big gap, and that's a limitation that we have in this study. Next leap second will do better. So the key difficulties here are that server error time series, of course, is not only showing server errors. It's also going to be including congestion variability. So here's the forward delay, some constant, plus a positive noise, and the same in the opposite direction. We have a lot of routing change events, which means that constant's in fact not a constant, is time varying, and the same in the opposite direction. Piecewise constant, you'll see an example of that. And this error should not be centered on 0, it's going to be centered on underlying asymmetry. So we can't even expect it to be 0 even under ideal conditions. So the key challenge here is how can we disambiguate a true server error from all this other stuff which is happening? bit of a chicken and egg problem. So in a nutshell, our approach is this. We can use the round trip time to judge what's happening in the network path, because the round trip time is completely independent of server timestamps. It doesn't matter what the server's doing, we can measure that round trip time accurately. More than that, we can use the round trip time variability as a bound on the variability in the error time series. That's because the round trip time adds the delays in the two directions together. So events due to routing changes get added, and variability from the two directions gets added. Whereas in the error time series, you subtract the two Ds. So you're partially cancelling routing events and you're partially cancelling congestion events. So now let's go through an example of how all this works. So this is a good server. This is the change time series, CI, the change time series, and we're seeing, as we might expect, a sudden jump at what looks like the right point. 0 means I've reinitialized the origin, so 0 means where the jump actually occurred, where the leap second is. We see this jump. If we look instead at the error time series, this is what you'd like to see. Absolutely nothing happening apart from background noise when you go past the leap second. This is lovely. Notice that this is 1 second, so it's a huge scale, so variability gets squashed and you can't see it. When you remove that jump, you end up having, it's like taking a big fat zoom, so you see the variability. Now if we look in the round, what's happening with round trip time over the same period, we see that as we pass the leap second, again there is nothing, no action happening, no events of any significance occurring around the leap second, so that we trust this. Nothing much happening in the path. There is this big jump in indicating a routing change event and a round trip time. It doesn't appear here because that jump happened to be asymmetric, perfectly symmetric in each direction, so it was perfectly cancelled in this case in the error time series. So here the time to expected behaviour was 51 seconds, that's what that black circle is. That sounds really bad. Why, 51 seconds? That's not an error, that's just a reflection of the fact that the first data point we had was 51 seconds past the leap. And when we saw that, we saw behaviour that we should have seen. So we call this a good server, which by definition means no evidence at all of a problem. Now let's look at one which delays. The jump is here, so we can see that clearly the jump is late. So clearly this is hard evidence of bad behaviour. If we look in the error time series, we see that not only is it delayed, but there's now this change in level. So the question is, does this indicate some other kind of problem occurring associated with the leap or not? So to look at that, we turn to the round trip time series, and we see that at that exact time, there was a change in level due to a routing event with a corresponding magnitude which can explain this. So this change in level from here to here has got nothing to do with the leap second event, so it doesn't correspond to an additional problem associated with the leap second. We can therefore accept where that black circle value measured now at 26 minutes. This is a bad server because we found hard evidence of a server error. Here's a more interesting one. You see again it's slightly delayed, but now we claim that we had to wait much longer before the server started doing the right thing. When we do this, effectively the zoom in the error plot, we see this interesting nonlinear overshooter effect. Now this might be hard to understand because surely this is just a question of a piece of software which says add in precisely 1 second at the right time. I mean, how hard can it be, right? Well, unfortunately, the network time protocol daemon is very good at being unstable, and this is an example of how you give it a bit of a shock, it gets confused, and then takes a long time to recover. In this case, 75 minutes, which is a long time to be wrong. Now, they were relatively simple examples. We came across quite a few really interesting, more extreme examples. Here I'm only showing the change time series because I need that big scale of 1 second in order to see errors this big, right? So here we have it goes up to a second, oops, sorry, changes his mind, comes down. This guy does a two-step. This guy does a lot of variability before finally settling down. If I zoomed in, you would see that this is the point at which things finally settle down. And this guy is just going crazy all the time. Actually, ironically, the leap wasn't too bad, but it's just doing bad stuff all the time. So the remember, what we're looking at here are stratum 1 servers. These are supposed to be the gold standard. These are supposed to be anchoring the world's system of timing, right? And they're screwing up. Right? So this is the interesting thing about this work. So looking across all of our servers, here's a CDF of the different values of TEB that we found. And we see there's a log scale because it's a very wide variety. There are a couple which never jump, right? So they never jump at all over 22 days. They probably never will. There's a wide variety. There are a lot underneath 64. This is the 64-second mark, that pole period. There are many under here. Now this looks like it's curved, but if you plotted this on a log-log plot, this would be a straight line. And that's exactly what you'd expect from, based on our sampling, which effectively becomes a uniform sampling of a period of 64 seconds around that leap second. So that indicates that all the different values that we get here are what you would expect from a natural variation of when we sample, because each instance is separate, synchronizing to a different server, and they are synchronizing asynchronously, if you know what I mean. The interesting thing here, the red guys are bad. Red marks a bad server, so we found hard evidence in each case that they are a problem. But the interesting thing is that there are other examples here, which even though the TEB is larger than 64 seconds, so it's clear evidence that something is happening, we still rated them as good. So how do we explain that? So what we found in a fair number of cases is that after the leap second, there's an absence of, the server doesn't respond basically for quite some time. Now we're being very generous, and the first time when it does respond, finally after the leap second, if the clock looks good, we'll give it a tick and we'll call it a good server. But it's not good from the point of view of its availability. And we believe that what's happening here is that these are system administrators who are aware of the problems that are going to happen during a leap second. They bring the system down before the leap second. They wait until their upstream server is doing the right thing and only bother rebooting afterwards. So we've labeled them here as good servers, but they are not good from the availability point of view. Now, a quick look at the protocol compliance. The LI bit should be doing the following things. In the month of the leap, at some point, they should start putting in every single response packet they send to clients, they should be setting these LI bits to a value of 2, I think it is. RFCs are actually a bit unclear about exactly when they should be starting this, but 24 hours seems to be the consensus in the literature. So they should be starting these warnings within the month. They need to start early enough so that their clients can actually get the message, right? If you start warning them at the last minute, they may never see those packets, and then you'll be in trouble. And of course, they need to stop before the leap, after the leap. If even a single LI bit is seen after the leap, that could be seen as a signal that there's going to be another leap second at the end of that next month. Right? So that is kind of important. Now, and I'm just repeating the same graph. This time I'm pointing out that the black circles indicate, I know it's probably hard to see with this, obviously not very high definition projector here. These black circles indicate servers which were bad from the protocol point of view. So you see in here, there are a lot of servers which were good from the timing point of view, but they fell down on the protocol side. Here's a histogram of the starting times. You see that most of them did start at 24 hours ahead, but there's quite a variety, including some which didn't give their clients much of a warning. Here's a summary of the kind of overall compliance. And here I have to point out a couple of new things. As I said, we created this list of purportedly Stratum 1 servers, but not all of the servers, as it turned out, were Stratum 1. Some were Stratum 2 all the time, some were Stratum 3 all the time, some varied. Let's just focus here on the ones which were Stratum 1 all the time. We classified 72% of those as good, based on our criteria. Again, they might have been bad because of the resolution limitations of the work, we weren't able to spot that, right? We weren't able to look straight after the leap second, which is what you would like to do. But we classified 72% as good. In terms of the protocol compliance, 60% were good, and 64% only were good with respect to both of those criteria. I want to point out here, these are two standards bodies. The National Measurement Institute is Australia's time and frequency standards body, including they have responsibility for Australia's reference time. and NIST is the corresponding organization in the US. So we see that even some of the NIST servers were not doing the right thing. It's a bit of a problem. So in conclusion, this is, as far as we know, the first detailed study of timing server behavior during leap seconds, and we're focusing on the stratum 1s, which, as I said, is supposed to be the gold standard and the root of the system, so it is important that they be performing well. What we found is that many of the servers didn't handle leap seconds properly. We had error durations lasting from minutes to indefinite in some cases, a wide variety of different crazy error types, from simple things to crazy stuff. Many servers failing to inform their clients of the leap second coming up in time or even not at all. And when that happens, of course, all of their clients, unless they can get news of the leap second by some other means, all of those clients are also going to fail to jump when they should. And that could propagate down the hierarchy. Interestingly, when we submitted this work, there was actually going to be a meeting of the ITU last November to decide on the future of the leap second. There's been a serious discussion to abolish leap seconds for quite some time. So I was a bit anxious to get this paper in quick because once leap seconds are abolished, who's going to want to hear about this stuff? As it turned out, A, the paper was accepted. That's great, thank you. B, they decided to pass the buck and to defer the decision until the next meeting, a meeting in 2023. So leap seconds will be around until at least 2023. Hard to get rid of. It would be quite radical to get rid of them. It means that the clocks that we use all the time will start getting more and more out of sync with the Earth, and that will become noticeable in 100 years or so. And finally, this talk focused on leap seconds, which is a fun niche topic. That leap seconds occur maybe every 2.5 years, roughly on average. And what happens all the time is we're connecting to time servers all the time, and anyone who's going to Infocom will get to hear, hopefully, another talk I'm giving where I talk more generally about the anomalies that you can find out there in servers. Thanks.
Questions?
Thank you for this interesting talk. Do you have an idea why these servers behave so differently? Do they use different software? Is it an administration or management problem or a hardware problem?
I have tried to contact all of the administrators, and a lot of them have replied. I haven't had time to really trawl through their replies in detail. A lot of their replies would not actually shed any light on that question. I suspect there's a wide variety of reasons, because on that list there are a wide variety of different kinds of clocks. One could point out that it's only a small list of servers and maybe it's not very important, but a lot of those servers participate in the NTP pool system for load balancing. That's very widely used. And there are many national laboratories, including NMI and NIST, in that list. So at least some of the servers have some influence. But there are also all and everything on that list, including enthusiasts who have cesium atomic clocks in their garages and talk about timing stuff day and night. But they actually would probably run a system that's with very high uptime because they're very dedicated. So I suspect there's a wide variety of reasons behind it.
Thank you.
Do we have here?
Okay, although you didn't talk about that, but can you give us an example of disaster the leap second may cause? I'm very interested.
I wish I could give you a really good, like planes falling out of the sky. Not that I want planes to fall out of the sky. I think that what is undeniable is that people are aware that leap seconds are a problem, and that there are often the system administrators will take down their servers just to avoid the problem completely and reboot them later. So that's a real impact. It's not a disaster, but it's a real impact that's out there.
To your question, so one of the systems that we operate is a distributed storage system that uses Stratos, and it relies on distributed clocks. And we actually got some warnings during that time of the leap second. I didn't couldn't believe that anything bad would happen, but because of the servers, we configured them to use these pools. So they end up with different, getting the time from different sources, and some of them were already off. And so for a while, we had differences between these important servers that actually caused inconsistencies in this agreement protocol. So it could have caused trouble in the storage system. I guess this is why people like Google take this so seriously and use these smearing techniques and so on. So I was surprised I wouldn't have expected any impact.
Any other question?
Yeah.
Maybe I don't need the microphone. Could there be a modification of the time system, like when you switch from regular time to the DST, you have this flag? Could there be a solution for this to avoid a second problem, just at the moment where there's leap seconds? Notify the system that it's not the same time, and no Excel
You mean a window should pop up saying, warning, your system clock's just been adjusted? Is that what you...
If we have a time data type in which we would embed this information so that we would have a variable which would have the same time, we would have the same flags of the time that the log system and so on could use in order to avoid having inconsistencies during this very segment.
I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. There are many possible kind of twists I could put on your question. There are options in system clocks which, you could configure things to ignore a leap second. There should be clock options where you could call a particular clock which would ignore it, but other clocks would not. But I'm not so sure about how widespread that implementation is. NTP now often recommends that you default configuration is to set an option so that you would ignore the leap seconds and instead just use a normal adaptation to your server to adjust to it slowly over time, but that takes hours to converge to the right value, but it's safer in the sense that you're less likely to do something very crazy. I should say that the one reason why why leap seconds are difficult, especially the positive leap second, is difficult because in this period here you have, it's not just a single leap, but this whole second duration here, software has to do complicated stuff. You have to worry about the fact that there's 1 minute's going to have 61 seconds instead of 60, which is not normal. You have to worry about the fact that here there are possibly two different time instances with the same UTC value, which is just like a real number in seconds. You have that non-uniqueness. So a lot of issues that get created by this.
All right, so maybe you can talk about it offline a bit more. We're going to move to the next speaker, and let's thank her once again. Thank you.
Thank you.